Good evening, everyone. My name is Cassie Ajimandua, and I serve as the president of the University of Maryland Black Alumni Association. I would like to welcome you all to the second session of our financial wellness series. This session will be focused on accessing business capital. Our first session was focused on general finances, and that can be found on YouTube and accessed via a link which can be found on our social media pages. Additionally, I wanted to let everyone know that this event will be recorded so that you can watch it in the future. Now, I will turn it over to Dr. Shameka Mills, our Vice President and the moderator for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassie. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shameka Mills. Thank you for attending our event, Accessing Business Capital with Ms. Jainaba Ceesay. I'd like to introduce you to her before we begin. Just to also let you know, everyone is on mute. However, if you have questions during the presentation, just enter them in the chat and Ms. Ceesay will answer them either in her presentation or afterwards she'll do a Q&A. Ms. Ceesay's professional career spans over 2 decades, including 19 years as an accomplished banking, management, leadership, and financial professional. She has a proven track record in leadership, change management, retail and consumer banking, small business and commercial lending, business development in the banking, finance, and higher education industries. Jainaba has won numerous prestigious awards for her outstanding work, including BB&T's Top Sterling Performer and M&T's Bank President Council Award for successfully leading teams in annual sales goals accomplishment. After a decade and a half in the financial field at 2 Fortune 500 companies, she founded EBROSSO Consulting. EBROSSO Consulting is a management consulting firm that offers business problem solving, strategic entrepreneurship, financial consulting, leadership and coaching, sales and marketing services via one-on-one, classroom, face-to-face, webinars, and keynote speaking. She's an alum of the University of Maryland, University College, now UMGC, where she obtained her Bachelor's of Science degree in accounting. She is also an alum of the Robert H. School of Business at the University of Maryland College Park, where she obtained her Executive Master's in Business Administration. She also lectures on entrepreneurship, leadership, and professional development, sales and marketing at Bowie State University in Bowie, Maryland. So I'd like to welcome Ms. Jainaba Ceesay.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shameka Mills. It is very I'm very honored to be here today and come to a wonderful, great alumni to share. So it's definitely an honor here to join this panel. So thank you all for having me, as well as Ms. Cassie, the president, for inviting me. So if you would like me, you just want me to continue from there?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So once again, everyone, welcome to this great session, especially business and accessing capital. Very, very passionate about, and always excited and looking forward to sharing. What I love about sharing about access to capital or any forms of business is you can walk away right away and able to implement something, at least for a short time, that would lead to a long-term goal. So that's what's always make it excited for me. So to give a little overview of how this session is gonna look like, gonna do presentation with my this slide that I have up, which is more geared towards business capital. And hopefully that will answer some questions. And if not, we're gonna move on to another Q&A, and there's some questions that were gathered that Shameka will read that will answer as we go along. Hopefully that sounds like a plan. So as she mentioned, I graduated with my executive MBA here at the University of Maryland Smith School of Business in 2017. And we like to call ourselves cohort 16. She did mention about my bio, so I'm not gonna spend too much of that. But if you wanna get a little bit more information about my company, EBROSSO Consulting is where it is. February is always a great month for me. I celebrate a lot of anniversaries, including my wedding. and also when I got into banking, which was February 26, 2001. So yes, I'm celebrating 20 years into doing this and excited and looking for other greater heights. But one of the most thing is able to do speaking and share my knowledge. But at the same time, would also like to learn if you never know who's in the audience. Sometimes somebody has some information they want to add. And of course, this is a University of Maryland Alumni Association. So it's always full of great wealth and knowledge of people across industries. So feel free to share additional information in the chat as well. So a little bit about capital that I want to talk about. We do mention a lot about talking about access to capital. But before we talk about access to it, I want us to first talk about what is it in itself, right? Because capital could be very, very broad. So I want to bring it a little bit into the aspect of this presentation in itself, so it will fit in that context, right? So when we talk about capital as in for a business, it's funds that a business need or needed to run the business. And it allows to help startup, if you're starting your business, or if you're making an expansion into an existing business that you have. Capital comes in different ways, and we will talk about it. And sometimes people do take it for granted, capital that may come from another source that may not realize because it may not have strings that are attached to it. And when I mean strings, when you are borrowing money, there's strings attached to it that you have to pay at a certain time, period of time. So that is why I just wanted to bring it to this context so we understand that capital comes in different ways. Right? So from a debt to equity standpoint, right? I just got into my teaching mode was going to ask, what is debt? What is equity? But of course, this one is more for webinars. So I won't be able to ask the audience. I guess I'm just going to present it, right? So if you hear a lot about what they talk about in a balance sheet of a financial statement. I don't want to get it too technical, but I just want to show a little bit higher level of how a balance sheet has debt versus equity in itself, right? So from a high level standpoint, a debt, of course, is money that part of a capital that you can borrow to anybody who is willing to give it to you. Most common ways are in financial institutions, right? But you can borrow money in different sources, right? So where you can either put up something, a collateral, like I was saying, strings attached earlier on. So you can use that, put up your house or put up something we call a collateral. That's what you were giving up to that lender or whoever that person looked like who's giving you that money for them to exchange that money to you, right? That's what the debt look like. The equity version look like also you're doing some kind of exchange, but in this way, you're giving more in an ownership way of that. Now, how does that impact what we call your balance sheet, right? So if we look at the balance sheet, it is assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity, right? So if we, sorry, I got too excited a little bit. So if you look at that composition, you leave the asset on the side, the owner's equity, if you are going to take a debt, is going to impact what we call the liability aspect of things, or is going to impact the owner's equity side of things, right? So that's why I was saying when we talk about debt versus equity, either way, they're all in your balance sheet is going to impact that. So just from a high level, I know when we talk about balance sheet, it could be a little bit technical based on which kind of field that you are in, but I just wanted to show that from that aspect. So now, let me move my face in this side so I can come on this side of the presentation, right? So like I said, debt can be obtained, if you look at the right side of my presentation, it can be obtained through many sources, such as a financial institution, and generally they will ask you to pledge a collateral I list several other ones from the SBA, which is the U.S. Small Business Administration. It's a government agency set up to allow small businesses to be able to access financing in several different ways. But they have taken it a whole nother level and provide a whole lot. But their main thing is providing loans. So I set up some different type of loans that they do offer. One of them is the Sba Micro Loans, which is about $50,000 or less for startup or, again, expansion. Then you have the 7A one, which is a most common loan that include financial help for businesses to do special financing and also working capital or real estate, right? Then the 504 is a long-term one, which is a fixed rate to buy or purchase the real estate. So I just want to give a little bit of this kind of loans that are out there that you can obtain for financing. But I want to be very, very clear. One thing that people sometimes don't get to or can get confusing with the Small Business Administration. They are programmed. They don't do the loans themselves. They do it through banks, through financial institutions. However, when you go to the SBA website at sba.gov, when they tell you all the programs they have, they will be based on your zip code. They will tell you who are their participating lenders who offer those types of loans. And the SBA likes to recommend banks that makes it much easier for their loans to be accessible. So you will see those come in. So for instance, when I was with M&T Bank, we did heavily SBA lending. And at some point in my area, they were leading. So because of that, more people were referred to us about that, right? Now, banks also give other loans that are not SBA loans. They give regular loans. However, for a startup, banks they get it very hard to give you a loan because it's very risky as a startup to give you a loan. So that's why they will do it, but they will go with the SBA. And the reason the SBA is involved, they guarantee most of these loans in case they go bad. They have a shared risk with the bank. So the bank will lose half, the SBA will lose half, which is a government is a government guarantee loan. So I want you guys to understand it that way. But there's still other loans that banks do offer that are not that are not SBA loans. But if you're a startup, you'll most likely be geared to do an SBA loan. All right, the other one is the equity option that we're talking about, where in your balance sheet, if you are a 100% owner of your business and you need funding for about 100,000, like if you guys look, I don't know if anyone here watches Shark Tank style, if you pitch and they decide to partner with you, you will give up some of your equity into the business. And the beauty of that is you are less leverage in a debt option, because if you look at your balance sheet, if so much of your money is tied into debt, you have to make a lot of obligational payments versus the equity side where normally loan, is tied to profit sharing. Okay. And the only thing also though, when you're doing an equity financing, you gotta watch out to 20%, because when it becomes more than 20%, it kind of like takes a whole lot more of a decision making. Most of the time you get through equity financing by pitching your business, your model for to investors or venture capitalists who see that your business is a viable business model, then they're able to invest in it. Here are source of funding that I put in here. I know I've already mentioned banks are one way that you can go, which are financial institutions. They're angel investors, which are normally not for big organization, but it's a group of people that put funds together that you can obtain financing also from. Crowdfunding, now that is very, very popular, especially with the rise of technology. There's a lot of crowdfunding sites over there. Kickstarter is one of them, but there's several ways their funds could be raised through campaign. Then, of course, there, again, the venture capitalists, which are the bigger one, family, friends. There are all ways that funds could be raised. But I do say, when you're getting funds from people, whether it's a bank or it's a venture capitalist, well, with those, they will kind of they'll make sure they structure it in a way that they are protected, their asset is protected. But when you're doing it with friends and family, you still want to make it as a business, put the obligations in there, make your promissory note, whichever way that will make sure that if anything happens, you can take it to a court and be able to settle it. So it doesn't matter whether it's friends or family, wherever way you get the funding, do it the right way. Get the right people involved, get the right documentations in place. Here are the resources that I put in here, where it definitely gives you a lot of guidance, and now they offer, especially with this virtual environment, there's a lot of webinars that I offer that you can join at the comfort of your home, just like you are doing with this one as well. Check out SBA School, where they do mentoring programs, and of course the SBA program. I mentioned one called the Maryland e-marketplace. If you live here in the state of Maryland, it's another great way that you can access and register your business. And if you're a minority, there's a way that you can be a minority business owner. If you want to do business with the state, you can get preferences in contracts, because there's some contracts out there the state would only give to minority owners. That's where this minority business is. There's an 8A certification through the federal government program, which gives you that, I think up till 9 years, you as a business owner will be able to get preferential way to bid on contracts and get it while you're in that infancy of developing your business. And of course, the PPP, which is the Paycheck Protection Program that was passed amid COVID, that has other options there also to help businesses. All right, so I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna turn it over to Shamika, and we will take it to the second phase of the webinar, where there were questions that were drafted, but also questions regarding this presentation as well. So Shamika, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. So we have some questions that were previously submitted when people first registered for the event. And then there are some questions coming in through the chat. Of course, if you have questions, or someone actually also entered some resources, please do so, and we'll try to include that as we continue. So for the first question, what is your top 3 advice for aspiring or new entrepreneurs?
Okay, great. That's really, really a great question. I love that, because it is something that I lecture on. So I would say, first of all, aspiring entrepreneur, you want to change the world. There's a problem you want to fix. There's something out there that you believe where you are in currently right now that you are not fulfilling, right? That may lead into going to doing something, right? Now, sometimes the way that may look like when you are sitting in a, in a normal comfort of your regular job may be different when you go out there to explore it. But I will say the first one is first do enough research to find out who are the players. Are there other people who are solving those problems? Because some of the top reasons people went into business is, again, solving a problem, filling in the gaps, or emerging technological trends, right? But it may be a problem that is just unique to you. It may not necessarily be other people's problem. And I always tell folks that those other people, they're the one who's going to be buying your product. So it has to be their problem. It just can't be something you are noticing. So what I will say from a research perspective, Tiff, there's what we call now called the lean startup model, where you don't have to put as much investment, but you're going to spend some time in doing customer discovery, right? So look for accelerator programs in your area. There's areas that we call the SBDCs, Small Business Development Centers. There are places in the New York area, I think they call them the Y Incubator. And at Bowie State University, we have the Bowie Innovation, BIC, they call it Bowie Innovation Center. So all those are resources that help with acceleration program that you may want to take a look at and understand those resources. But you definitely want to understand customer discovery process. Is there people who are going to buy it? And there's a lot of resources these days about the customer discovery journey that you can follow by using friends and family, sending out survey and see if that is there, right? The second one, also find out that the financing that it will take, right? So know that you're gonna have that right financing. When I was when I used to do loan underwriting, people would be very, very stretched into putting so much of their personal credit on the line, trying to do a venture. And when you are very crunched and tie up all your personal line with the business, don't have any money coming in, or you don't even have what we call attraction, people who are potentially gonna buy that could put you up in a very, very tight position. So, you wanna take a risk, but it has to be very, very calculated, and look at sources of funding that you can pitch to people. Because if it's a good business, the venture capitalists will ask you, are there attraction people who are buying this? Watch Shark Tank and see how that goes. So when you pitch, you can get funding that way than putting so much of your own personal money. We call it OPM, other people's money. It's a good way of testing with, but of course, anybody who's going to give you money will make sure that you have a skin in the game as well. The third one is, is aspiring. You have to have passion, but passion also have to match consistency of doing it. Because one thing for me that I see the difference is, when you work for someone, you get up every day and go because you don't have a choice. You have to go, right? Or if you don't show up for work, you can get fired right off and things like that. But if you're working for yourself, you don't have that person, or you don't have that person asking you that you have to be at work. So you need that discipline that's going to get you up every day to go above and beyond, past that 40 hours until you get to where you need to be.
I'm sorry. I think this next question kind of goes in line with top 3 advice. Are there any circumstances in which you would tell a person that they are not yet ready to begin working towards their business plan?
Yes. And when I saw business plan, I was like, wow, because right now, what we are doing from the lean startup methodology, we're kind of a little bit asking business plan to come towards the end than the front, right? Because what you're doing in a business plan is more of like a business that's already established. That's what a plan do. So that's why we like folks to use the lean startup methodology, where you are testing yourself. You're testing, is this product there? Is everything is in there before you go in to start selling, as opposed to do some, how do I say, rosy business plan for the sake of that this looks good here, the projection, without having to have, attraction, meaning people who have already tested what you are selling. So for me, just a business plan, I am okay to tell someone that this is not gonna fly, unless, again, you are buying maybe a franchise which already have an established business. But if it's something that hasn't existed at all, you have to be able to test it. And the only way by testing this is what we call talking to humans, understanding, is there really a need for this product before? Or there's a need, but there's also that need might have been filled by somebody else. Because I've seen folks create so many things only to find out that somebody else is doing it. So you definitely have to do primary and secondary research first before just putting a business plan together.
So in line with understanding the need for your product, this person is asking, how do you assess or test the market to determine the viability for the type of business or product that you're trying to sell?
Yeah, so that kind of like, yeah, going hand in hand with, talking to humans, understanding the product, because there's one thing, when you get people to test the product or ask them about it, they either have used it, they don't care much about it, or they used it, but they feel like there's another way that it could serve their need better, that will give you an insight for the existing products that are over there, or they're already perfectly fine with what they already have. But until, again, the research is done, surveys are done, see who is there, you won't be able to know that before you just go in and produce tens of thousands of products, come to find out, people, that's not really, really what they are looking for.
Moving on to a slightly different topic than the product. How much capital do you recommend for business startups?
Okay, so it depends. Capital really, really depends for what you are doing, what you are doing. So let's say if you need it for working capital meaning that, something that you will need, let's say, to buy some kind of ongoing operational in your business day to day, right? So what banks will do, because even you may come in and say, I need 300,000, people do what we call underwriting to understand if that 300,000 is something that you really need, right? It may not be 300,000, especially if it's a working capital. So it depends whether it's going to be working capital or it's going to be a capital for a machine that you need to buy. So let's say, you're going to make this product, but if there's this specific machine that you have to buy, if that costs $100,000, that's what they're going to give you. And if the bank gives that to you, it is going to be a fixed loan, installment loan, where they say by end of 5 years, we need you to pay this off, right? If it's working capital, you say, I need this for 45 days financing until my invoices are paid. Then they'll say, okay, how does this invoice look like? How much are they going to pay? Which becomes sometimes your account receivable, people who have to pay you. So it all depends on that. So that's why when it comes to capital, it's not a matter of just saying, oh, I need $500,000 or I need $1 million. It has to be underwritten to the minimum they see, because banks don't want to give you money that you're not going to utilize, you're not going to put into use, or something that you're not going to be able to pay. So that becomes very, very important from how much you will need. Is it going to be for an equipment that you're buying, which is going to be fixed amount, or is going to be working capital where they normally give you what we call a line of credit that revolves around when you pay it, it becomes available to you again.
And speaking of going to banks, what barriers might Black people and other people of color face based on historical inequities?
Yes, so thank you very much. So this is a very, very question that is very, very near and dear to me and my quest. If I'm getting into research, those are the things that I'm going to further myself along into doing, because it starts way before even getting into the bank in itself. And hence, for me, what I'm doing today to support small businesses, which most of them are minority folks, and also teaching at an entrepreneurial level and in leadership level to help people to understand the barrier before you get into it, right? Because one thing I will say, when I was doing underwriting, when someone meets all the criteria, it's a model that's out there. I have no choice but to give it to them, whoever that looks like, right? But before reaching into a financial institution, people of color have normally experience a whole lot of other barriers, in which could be credit, right? And the disparities in credit, as we see, when people of color don't have wealth that is passed on to them from previous generations, it's hard for them to kind of like start forward. So sometimes they have to fill in from a previous generation that may lead them to having not so good credit before they even get into owning their own business. So by the time they got into their own business, that credit might have, is very, very bad. And yes, even though the loans are small business administration loans, but there's certain credit score What banks will do, it don't matter whether it's an SBA or not, you have to fit in their box of credit. Minimum, I would say 680, which is even I hardly see someone who get a loans at a six, they will just tell you 680. But when I look at the FICO score, you know, the Fair Isaac model, which is the proprietary tool for one-way credit is built, 680 looks like you have already a lot of high, it's a good credit, but there's already a lot of high credit utilization that is already out there. So I barely get someone get approved into that. So yes, you know, bank, how do I say this? Banks already have a model that people of color, way before we get into that stage, we've already been out. So that's why for me, it is more of, and I think that will lead to some of your questions earlier on, is understanding credit at a very, very, very earlier age, because your credit would follow you into so many things that you do. And that includes access to capital in business or personal life.
I think this question goes a little bit further into that. How do you overcome the barrier of a lack of credit history in obtaining business credit without collateralizing it personally?
That is very, very tough as far as when it comes to debt, when you are getting a debt, because debts, especially in financial institution. Now, the way to overcome that, if you have friends and family who will overlook, not looking at your credit score, but knowing that your business model is something that they really highly believe in, and they see that you have done your testing, there's demand out there, there's orders out there. Because with financial institution, it doesn't matter whether you have all those orders sitting there waiting for you. If you don't make that, that's their business model, they're not going to give it to you. So alternative way. Then venture capitalist equity, right? That's why I'm a big proponent of people having their pitch decks ready, be pitching, going to different places, different startup weekends, accelerator program, be pitching. There's going to be someone in that room when you keep doing it who will believe in you, that would not look into your credit. At that point, they're looking into your business and see if that business is a viable model when you have products for. I've seen so many people come and pitch and they're like, here's my order that I have, I need to fulfill. I just don't have the capital to fulfill it. And then with there, you're gonna find the right person, but it's looking for that right person through doing venturing. And these days you can even do videos and pitch your product and upload it on YouTube and share. Keep doing that. Somebody's gonna reach out to you.
And you may have answered this a little bit already, but thinking of some of those barriers that you talked about, are there things that people of color should do differently when navigating accessing capital when compared to their white counterparts?
That's a very, very hard and hard questions for me as far as doing differently, because we all do know that the structural, institutional, that has led to this disparity for people of color versus white counterparts, right? I would say I'm thankful that as a nation we're getting there now, reckoning right now, having those honest conversations to know that this just cannot be a fault of Black people. You know, we get up, we pursue the education, we're doing the hustle. So there gotta be something beyond what is leading to that disparities of that. So having those conversations and trying to impact change, whichever way that looks like, would help us. But meanwhile, follow the processes. What I say as far as doing your research, things we have control over meanwhile until those changes are taking place, where you do research. We all have access to data these days at the tip of our computer screen. We have access to research tools, to survey tools, to perfect our value proposition, to perfect our business model that gets so good that it don't matter what the color of your skin is, people are just there for the product and they will sell. So I would say with that, focus on what can be controlled right now and is building your business model, looking for resources. So for instance, University of Maryland, we have the Dingman Center, the School of Business. We have the Dingman Center for Entrepreneurship. That's one area that you can reach out to. There's a lot of resources that are out there, I would say, as far as us from alumni, we can reach out to, because that's their goal. And there was a recent report that came not too long ago that the Dingman Center was recognized for one of the places that do support people of color in their businesses. So us being an alumni here, I believe that's an advantage to us that we can look into those resources until the bigger change comes in for all of us that we need.
And these next two questions really kind of go with looking for resources. So I'm going to read both of them because they're fairly similar. The first one is, do you have any resources or know of any resources for someone who has a business idea but really doesn't have a starting point? And you did touch on some of these throughout your presentation. And the second question, sorry, I read it and then I lost it in my list of questions. What are training opportunities or curriculums would you recommend entrepreneurs seek out? So resources, okay, and then any training opportunities or curriculum.
Okay, great. So I'm the Dingman Center for Entrepreneurship. Like I said, that's one area that has tons of resources. So before I got into entrepreneurship teaching or academia, you know, there was a whole lot of other ways, like more of the SBA that I looked at. But when I looked at the SBA, it is a lot of things for more of someone who already have a business, what we call in the execution phase, right? And then when we teach in entrepreneurship in college, we talk about searching versus execution. And there's a big, big difference. For me, that's a very, very big quest for me for startups. Searching, and I always like that to be put in the chat, if someone can put that on where you are searching for your business model, versus when you already have a viable product, people are buying it, and all you need at that time is capital. Now, when you are in the searching phase, follow the lean way of you know, reaching out to entrepreneurship centers. There's a lot of them in, especially institutions, and they do care a lot about their alumni. And I would say University of Maryland, when it comes to entrepreneurship, I think they list the 6 in the top 50 by the Princeton Review, number 6. And part of that is alumni that are starting business, because that's one of the methodology the Princeton Review looks at. And Shamika, that's something I can send to you later about how that methodology looks like. And like I said, alumni starting an engagement is big deal of that. So Dingman Center for Entrepreneurship is one place to look at. I'm trying to figure out where else. Search for entrepreneurship, how to be an entrepreneurship training online. You will definitely be able to find those. But I do say that looking at our entrepreneurship center, again, Dingman will give you a whole lot of resources. It will they even mentors who you can set up with to support you in there as an alumni. So I say that's a great place to start. They may not have it all, but there'll be a whole lot of other resources. At Bowie State University, that's what we're doing for existing student and alumni as well. And you may be connected to another alumni who will mentor you, but they're really, really seeking to do that, and especially alumni, people of color as well. As we speak today, I have someone has reached out to me and said they're part of an angel network. They said they're intentionally looking out to HBCU and people of color because they want them as part of their group to, you know, to have that representation in there. So definitely seek out with those resources. You're gonna land onto something.
And we have another two questions that are somewhat similar. So I'll read them again, or I'll read them together. One of them is, how should you determine if you should be an LLC, incorporated, or a C Corp? And then the other question is, does the approach to getting financing differ based on how you're classified?
That is a very, very interesting question. It gets to a little bit more of the legalities of it. And I stay away from giving an advice, but I'll give an example of my own company, which is an LLC. that was the most feasible way for me, because with that still, my business runs through my personal tax return, which is a S Corp, right? LLC. So that's what worked for me. That was the easier way, but everyone, I would say, consult a tax advisor to be able to give you the benefits of which of those work out. But in entrepreneurship, that is kind of like, I would say, at the end goal of what you are getting to, because either way, you're going to be placed in one of those, right? That's kind of like the list to worry about, in a sense that when you have a viable product that has demand, you're going to have the right set of and advice to which one to put your business into. State of Maryland website, the e-marketplace, when you are registering, there's a whole lot of resources in there under SDAT, SDAT. And when you click and go onto business entities, it gives you each of those, you know, what you need, what each looks like. But I will say again, for me, those are kind of like towards the end side of what you're looking at. When you have a viable business, money coming in, the type of business you're going to put it in, you're going to find the right advice to do that. But most of them are more into to the extent of which liability is protected, whether it's limited or unlimited. I know with the three you list, I think all of those, you know, there's a little bit separation from the person's liability, which is more of the sole proprietor. But again, it comes in having a lawyer to be able to determine that, and a tax advisor.
Thank you. This next question is about community development financial institutions, whether or not you found them useful.
So I will say, what for me as a banker, let me use a banker standpoint, I have found them useful in a sense that people that cannot be approved on a regular bank model, I was able to send people there. So I will give an example of one here we have in Prince George's County. Is run by the county. I think it's called FSC First, right? That gives I don't think they give line of credit, they give term loans. There are people before who I could only give 50,000 in loan. I have a relationship with them when I was a financial manager, center manager, that went there, they were able to get big lines of credit. Now, their requirements of what you will put on the line, like your house, they have a whole lot more of those requirements. But if that's what is needed at that time, it is needed. So I'm a believer of not saying one is better than the other. It all depends on each person's situation. And it's always good to have each of them on the table so you can make an informed decision.
This next question goes back to classifying your business. What priorities do you consider when deciding between an LLC, an S Corp, incorporating, et cetera?
Again, for me, I think it's more of what the liability. So for instance, if you look at a C Corp, it's a big corporations. The company that I work for, the 500 companies, they're more on a C Corp basis, right? But an S Corp, I guess, is the number of people. They say when it's less than 100, or that are the ownership side of it. But again, that becomes more of a very technical. I don't want to put too much into that. I will definitely get that into the lawyers to determine that. I don't want to have to, give any kind of misleading information. But when I was getting to my own company, LLC was the one, because it's only 2 members that is owned. I'm the majority owner. And at the same time, my partner does have a W-2 wage. And sometimes myself, when I was starting, it do have some W-2 wage. What I mean W-2 is you're working for somebody else. When you're at a corporation, when you get wages, it's a W-2. So at that point in time, that's what was advised to us. And up till now, it works for us. I am not sure down the road, if we become to expand more, that might change. But at that time, that was the best. So your situation and the partner's situation, how do you want the income? So for instance, when you have a loss, it could become netted against our income and reduce our income liability. But you see, that gets to much more of very technical situation that I don't want to have too much of the conversation on. But I would say in the nutshell for us, you can bring it to net into your income. So if there's a loss, it will reduce your what we call your tax liability and reduce your tax bill from an LLC standpoint.
Going back to products, what type of factors or what factors should someone consider when pricing their products?
Okay, when I looked at that, I said, okay, definitely the cost that it takes you when you are producing the product, your quality, but also what does it take you to producing the product. And this is where what we call economies of scale, which most of us that are business majors did in economics become very, very important. If you're producing at really a smaller scale, you're definitely going to get into a point that the prices will be expensive if you're not going to be operating at a loss, right? So again, it all depends what is put into the product. And also looking at what are the other products out there in the market. If your product is a new product, people don't know it at all, and is sold at, I don't know, $300-400, there has to be very, very compelling reason where people will get it. So it definitely becomes very, very tough. How do you price that when you are getting your product debuting into it? So look at similar products in the market. It'll be very, very hard if you sell something like what Walmart sells and be able to get into that, because with Walmart, they have what we call a very, very big economies of scale. But then again, back to the lean startup methodology that I talk about, where you've already tested this product with certain group of people, which we call your early adapters, right? The early adapters become these people who have used the product. They say, you know what, this is something that I can use in a continual basis. And you know that they really need this. You can be able to find a price point with those, because you are checking with them how much you think they'll be able to pay for this and how much you put into it, and put that balance and meet at a middle ground. So pricing could become very, very hard because there are a lot of things that get into the play. But if you know who your early adapters are by talking to them, that would help with as far as pricing the product. And of course, still be cognizant too, because your product will not be 100% new that has never existed. So you want to be cognizant to what else is in the market out there.
Are there classic ways that you would recommend someone market their product?
Very, very much so. There's a whole lot of different ways that a product could be marketed. I know earlier we were talking when I was asking about my background, you're like, yeah, there's always got to be a way that you could market what you have. Right now with social media, it's very, very easy to put anything out there, but you definitely want to be targeted again if you're marketing your product, because you can throw your product out there in Facebook or Instagram, but if it's not well targeted of who you are looking to see it, you may get as much views as possible, but are they going to be the one to buy it? So very, very targeted marketing. Who's the demographic you're trying to target? Which area do they live in? What time of the day they may go to that Instagram. So whichever way, and all these tools do help you to do that. Then of course, testimonies are other ways that people who have used your product could do those product testimonies for you on social media as well. So different ways that you can definitely do that. But samples are a way also to try that. That's why I really love the lean startup, because you talk to people, they like it, they're going to be those people who are going to be your praise singers of the product.
And this is going back into capital and really resources again and relationships. What are some of the best local banks? And I assume the person asking this question is referring to Maryland specifically. But what are the best local banks to build a good business relationship with?
Wow. Okay. So everyone will tell you that they're good relationship banks, right? I do say look at regional banks. What we call most of these regional banks are banks that, they may not be all over the United States, but they are at a certain part of those. And I'll give you those list of names, for instance. BB&T, now Truist, M&T, PNC, they call themselves regional banks. they tend to say that they want to have a one-on-one relationship with their small businesses. And most of their managers are trained on small businesses. So they really love to build relationship management with their small business people that used to come to the bank. I don't know if they still do now with COVID, but look at regional banks in the area and look at that. So these three that I name, they really pride themselves on doing that. SunTrust Bank as well, but now they and BB&T are forming Truist. So you can definitely look into those and take a look at their websites. And I would say, even though the banks will pride themselves on, sometimes it's that individual manager who you get to see. So check the reviews, if you can shop it and see the atmosphere before you get into a relationship with them, will be good. But now also, I know the bankers would not like me to hear this now. There's a lot you can do, a lot of relationship you can access online. I know Bank of America, going to their locations may be tough, but if you look at their online, they have a lot of services and good offers for small businesses. And right now, credit is very, very cheap. Prime is at, I think, 3.25, I believe. Last year it was 4.75. Prime is the rate that banks lend each other, kind of like money in, because of the how you call it, the corona. The Federal Reserve don't want us to have crunch or recession going on. So money is cheap right now to obtain. Very, very cheap. So a lot of people are throwing out money. Not literally, but it's easier to access finance. So make sure wherever you go with, you do a good due diligence and be in a good negotiating power of getting credit. If you fit their model of the credit score that they're looking for.
I have another couple of questions on equity.
Okay.
How do you assess and determine which investors to give equity to?
Oh, that is a good one. So when you go in, I guess before you go in and pitch, look at what kind of investors that are out there on the panel, right? So I'll give an example for Shark Tank, right? So if you go and all the people up there on Shark Tank, right? So you want to see who you want to do business with if you make it to Shark Tank. With other ones as well, find out what kind of what is their vision and mission of where they invest in. Some people want to invest in people in the energy, right? Some want to invest into social entrepreneurs, right? Social entrepreneurs meaning those that are trying to bring, market-driven solutions into complex societal issues. So look at what your mission is, and tie it into those whose mission match your mission, and go to that. And these days that's very easy to, before pitching, and find out what that looks like. So you can do the research on those and make sure that, because for me, if I want to invest in something, I want to make sure that what I'm investing in matches my, my values and things like that. And if I'm also seeking funding from someone, I'll also make sure that what I'm providing matches those people's values. So it will become a long-term win-win-win relation, because it's equity that you are giving up. They're going to be part of that. So it might as well be a win-win, not just for the money exchange transactional, but let it be something that will be in the long run transformational.
And staying on the subject of equity, what percentage of equity do you recommend a startup or small company allocate for capital, and what percentage should not be exceeded?
So I would say 5 to 10% is good. Try as best not to exceed 20%. Because 20% is, if you, for instance, start with an equity financing, let's say that's your first way of going, which will say, okay, that may be preferable based on the need you assess. If you at 20 and you then go into a bank to get a loan, anytime a bank, if you're getting a debt, they need anyone who's 20% or more, most banks, to sign what you call a financial statement. So be less than 20%. If you can stay within 1 to 10, is even much better for the negotiation standpoint. So when you go into a negotiation, start with 5% and work your way up, but try as best not to get to that 20. But of course, it again depend on your situation. If you really need the fund and someone say, I really need that 30%, and you believe that's the right thing to do at that time, you can do it. But from a negotiation standpoint, try to be less than 20% and start with 5 and work your way up.
We have a few questions that are more on personal finance. Would you be okay answering those?
Yes, when I saw it, I saw a few little ones that I may be able to answer, but I can also direct folks to other resources sites as well.
Okay. Let's see. Sorry about that. I had to go down through my questions. To be smart, financially well-rounded, how much should we keep in an emergency fund?
Okay. I think before COVID, everybody kept saying 6 months emergency fund, 6 months emergency fund. Now we do know that COVID has shown that that is not true because of how long this pandemic is going. Now, what I've heard personal finance advisors are saying 12 months or more. So calculate all your expenses on a monthly basis and multiply it by 12 months and put that away for emergency funds. Now, that's not going to be something easy for many of us, right? But if we make it as a target, we'll be able to get there and put it away in something that you are not able to access that easily, just for emergency purposes.
And there's another question. What percentage of salary should be invested into either a 401k and or an IRA?
That's a very, very tricky question. Very tricky. But this is what I will give you. As I looked at T. Rowe Price, which is a company that I use myself, right? So for 2021, and I'm reading this verbatim, for contribution of your 401k, your standard, if you are under 50 years, right, that you can do at a tax year. And what they consider a tax year, I believe, is April 15. Let's say, for instance, right now we have up till April 15th of this year to contribute to finish up 2020 tax year. So we're still in 2020 tax year, right? $19,500 a year for 401k if you're under 50. $6,000 for an IRA. Catch-up contribution, which if you are over 50, you can do an additional $6,500, which give you $26,000 a year you can do if you're 50 and over. And a catch-up for IRA is $1,000. That would be $7,000. So now that then depends however many that person's income is, right? So it's not kind of like a percentage that is they determine about with what we call that standard contribution. Now, when it comes to taxes and everything, there's so many depends, right? So we always say, consider talking to your financial planner, your CPA, or tax advisor. There's a community group that we have. I share this information there, but I always say a disclaimer, I'm not a certified tax planner or CPA. So I put those disclaimer, but at least the standard that you could do. So now, what that means, what does that mean to you? Because I also want to give that sometimes we just throw out numbers, but we don't, know what it means. So for me, it has to talk about what is the impact, right? If someone's salary is $100,000 a year and they are under 50 years of age and they manage to contribute $19,500, right? Let me get my calculator here because my brain is not that good for that long to come with that number. So if we subtract 100,000 minus that 19,500, so technically your taxable income becomes $80,500. I hope that makes sense. that's what you will be taxed on, because the 401k is what we call, your taxes deferred, right? We're deferring our taxes until a retirement age. When we start what we call a distribution, then we get taxed. And hopefully, we are praying we become at a lower tax bracket by that time. Okay? Now, if you are over 50, where your contribution becomes that 26,000, then of course it becomes 100,000 minus 26,000, then your taxable income is about $74,000. Because again, your retirement plan is not taxed. So your company takes the money before they apply the taxes. So that's why I want people to understand from that standpoint. Now, IRA though is in a different category because there are different types of IRA. You have traditional IRA, you have Roth IRA. Now, the traditional IRA, that one is before taxes, whilst the Roth IRA is after tax one. So let's say, for instance, the amount of all this is a traditional IRA, and because all is to help you minimize your taxable income, and you are at an age of under 50. So, and this is a traditional IRA, we're going to do that 19,500 plus, is that amount of 600 here, 6,500. Let me do that real quick. Plus, I think it's 6,000, I believe. Don't get following for my math, but at least that's 25,500 minus your 100,000. You have a taxable income of 74,500. Then, of course, if you're over 50, it even becomes better. So those are kind of like the benefit of contributing to a 401k, because it's not taxed at that time, with the hope that when we get to the age, there's one they call the 59 and a half, where you take what we call voluntary distribution, where you can take the money out and get taxed at that age, we believe, because we do believe that although we become our tax brackets, what bracket we fall in will be taxed at a lower rate. So then if you happen to be, 10% income rate because you have less income, then you will pay less on your taxes. So in the nutshell, hopefully that gives at least a little background about that 401k. But anytime I see a 401k, I'm like, because it could be very, very technical. And because those are not something that I do for a living, and I always try my best as possible to be transparent. You want to give people information, but you don't want to mislead them. Just to give at least a basic, but you can take the research further. But I'll tell you, even for those of us that are knowledgeable in this, you can get lost in the IRS website, try to figure this whole entire thing out. Sometimes when I go to banks, sometimes I meet, some of their associates that may not be knowledgeable on it. And I'll see them calling. I said, okay, this is what you need to do. They're like, oh, let me just verify, because it's very complicated. And especially if you're at an age that, you haven't started contributing. So it's hard to understand 401ks and individual retirement plans, which are IRAs.
Yes, it's definitely complicated. And I don't know if this next question is even less complicated, but what do you think?
I'm doing justice though, for explaining it.
No, these are complex topics, like you said. This next question is about mortgage interest rates right now. They are historically low, I think. What do you think will happen to them in the future? Do you see them increasing anytime soon?
Oh boy, I'm gonna post that to who do we even have there? Jerome Powell, and now we have Janet Yellen sitting at the Treasury. Yes. They're very, very complex. And we do know that mortgage rate, I believe, are tied to the 10-year Treasury notes, which when I checked, I think it was about 1.3 something, according to Yahoo Finance. They're low, they're low. And if you look at the Treasuries, it's kind of like more of the rates that we have that, the Federal Reserve trying to do to pump money, to stimulate spending, to have access to money, right? So when the goal of the reserve is to people to have a lot of circulation, interest rates to be low, it is encouraging a spending economy versus a savings economy, right? So people tend to save when the rates are higher, right? So right now, that is the intentions of the Federal Reserve, for us to spend money, hence stimulus checks, right? Because we don't want recession. And it will be also tied to that lending as well, where those treasury rates will be lower for it to give it an opportunity for people to buy homes. So I am not sure where it is, but what I know they're talking about in the street, as far as the reserve and the treasury, they are less worried about inflation. They are more worried about recession, because from a macroeconomic standpoint, there are some stimulations that when you don't do in the short run, it's hard to reverse in the long run. It could lead to very, very bigger, dire situation. So inflation becomes a problem. What we mean by inflation, where prices keep going when people have a lot of money to their hand, when unemployment rates are low. But looking at unemployment rate right now, very, very high, inflation is a less of their worry. I'm sorry that I had to throw in inflation there. I hope I didn't kind of like lose anyone in there. But you can't talk about things like mortgage and rates, what we call monetary and fiscal policies, without bringing in things like your inflation. So to answer your question right now, inflation is not a big of a challenge, and hence inflation is not a worry for the economists. It's hard for them to raise the rate. They meet what they call the open board Fed committee. I think they meet every month or every other month. They will decide. And so far, the indication have been they're not touching the rates right now. It's next to zero right now, where they leave it. And if it's next to zero, you add what we call 0 to 0.25. You add 3%, that leads to prime, which is at 3.5%. Again, it's very loaded, but just to answer it, right now, rates are here for now. They're trying to do a spending economy, not more of a savings economy.
Thank you. There's one more question, and I just wanted to quickly give our attendees some information, and then thank you and give a few other pieces of information. So there's one question that someone submitted on educating children, teens, young adults on finances. And our presenter at the first financial series that was in October actually has a book that discusses that exact topic. So that presentation, as Cassie mentioned in the beginning, is available on YouTube. The link is on our social media pages. His name is Matt Gardner, and the book, is The Four Money Bears, and I'm putting that in the chat.
Thank you. I'll be glad to access that myself too, because you can never have enough information about raising our generation or next generation of children to understand finance.
Exactly. So Ms. Ceesay, I want to just thank you for spending the time with us, your Friday evening. Happy anniversaries, both of them, for your wedding and for your career in finances. Obviously, you've given us a lot of information to think on, and I hope we're all able to go forward with our own business plans and say that you're the one who got us started or helped us to that next step. For everyone who's attending, I have included her website in the chat. It's in there a couple of times. I will add it again in just a second. Oops, sorry about that.
Oh, that was me that put on the thing. Sorry, I stopped sharing the screen. I hope I didn't mess up.
Okay. No, it's fine. So I'm going to include your information again in the chat. Thank you so much. For all of our attendees, we will be having a third event coming up soon. So we hope we are able to see you at that event. And the recording for this event will be available shortly on our social media pages as well.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank all the participants for their time and the resources that they shared. Yes, I just saw one, Maryland Momentum Fund. Yes. So that is really, really awesome. One thing I forgot to say is also Startup Maryland. That's another folks also. And I think they housed here in the campus. They are another place as well if you live in the state of Maryland. Sorry that we're a little biased towards Maryland, but it's the University of Maryland, right? So yes, thank you so much. And thank you all for all you do. Shamika and the president and the entire board for helping getting everyone engaged, and happy Black History Month. This is really worth my time.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Please be safe. Bye.
Bye-bye.